Okay, so let's begin again with some Dharma talk about meditation. So some people have just joined us, so just to let you know that we've been talking about enlightenment over the last few days. And we've been thinking about how we can get there. And today I've been asked to talk about some practical meditation methods to help us get there. It's important to remember, however, that meditation is just one part of the path that will lead us to enlightenment. And sometimes when the Buddha talked about how to get there, he talked about things that maybe you kind of think, what? Why? Like, for example, he talked about the importance of moderation in eating. And you think, what does eating have to do with enlightenment? And of course, we know that all living beings rely upon food, right? Every living being needs to eat. This is something the Buddha said, all living beings subsist on one thing, nutriment. And so this is something that all beings want. We want food. So there's always desire for food, there's always hunger. And so this is why it's important to develop moderation in eating, because if we're not careful, that very natural desire leads to greed and even leads to things like fighting over food and things like that. And so moderation in food, sharing food, things like that, knowing the measure, we call it, in our monk life. We should know the measure of our stomach, how much to eat, right? We shouldn't overeat, we'll just become drowsy and lazy. And we shouldn't undereat, we'll lose the energy we need to practice. So this is something, he said, this is part of the path to enlightenment, is making sure that we have moderation in eating. Another thing he said was wakefulness, being alert, not being lazy. So the ability to persevere in our practice, to make effort. And so it's very tempting, every day you think, oh, I'll meditate, or maybe I'll just have a nap. Or, oh, I can't be bothered, I'm too tired. But the Buddha encouraged us to practice wakefulness, alertness, to really persevere and be energetic in our practice. And we have to strike a balance between being, relaxed and comfortable and have the time to practice, and not practicing at all, doing too little, and then also make sure we balance being too stressed, agitated and determined. And so these are things that maybe we don't think about as being part of enlightenment, but that sustainable spiritual growth that comes from regular repeated practice every day, or as frequently as you can. This is something that will help get us there. And so when we think about the kinds of things that lead to enlightenment, it's not just meditation. So I just want to draw your attention to that. And of course, remember all those other aspects of the path, such as ethics, generosity, and listening to the Dharma, developing wisdom and things like that. But today we're talking about meditation subjects. The Buddha taught so many meditation subjects, 40 meditation subjects, maybe even more. And he talked about the different things that would help us in our practice that weren't meditation subjects, like ethics, generosity, wisdom, etc. Towards the end of his life, when he was travelling around knowing that he was coming to the end, he frequently spoke about the 37 Bodhipakkya Dhammas. Are you familiar with those, the 37 wings of enlightenment? So I won't go through all of them today, because it's quite a lot. But it includes things like the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the satipatthanas. It includes things like the 5 spiritual faculties and the 5 spiritual powers. So that's faith, energy, mindfulness, samadhi, and wisdom. And it includes things like the 7 factors of enlightenment, the bojjhangas. Do you know those? Yeah. And it also includes the 4 right efforts. The 4 right efforts. And there's a couple of different ways we can refer to this, but I'll refer to it today as samavayama, the factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, right effort. So this is our right effort on the spiritual path. What is our right effort? Well, the Buddha made it pretty easy. You know, when he talks about right effort, we can simplify it to 2 right efforts. The right effort to overcome unwholesome, unskillful states, and to cultivate wholesome, skillful states. So it's the twofold division. Just don't do evil, bad things. Do good, wholesome things. It's pretty simple, right? Child could understand that, but it's quite difficult to practice sometimes, especially because of the habit pattern of our mind, the tendency of our mind, which we see in meditation. We see how difficult it is. Our mind goes towards these things, and it seems like we can't control it. So when the Buddha talked about the 4 right efforts, he talked about the first one, to prevent unwholesome, unskillful states that have not yet arisen from arising in our mind. So to prevent unwholesome, unarisen states arising. So we don't want stuff coming in that's unwholesome, unskillful. And to abandon already arisen, unwholesome, unskillful states. So we prevent them coming in, any new ones, and any ones that we've got going on at the moment, we abandon them, we let them go. So this image for me is like the image of a person in a boat that's got a hole in it. First thing to do, plug the hole, right? Don't let any more water in. And then you can scoop out the water that got in. And so this is the first 2 of the 4 right efforts to prevent unarisen, unwholesome states from arising, and to abandon the arisen unwholesome states. So that's like on the bad side. And then there's the good side. So we want to cultivate or develop unarisen, wholesome, skillful, good states. And we want to maintain, and this is the hard part, maintain those arisen, good, wholesome, skillful states. So go through them again. Prevent unwholesome states. Abandon unwholesome states. Cultivate wholesome states. Maintain wholesome states. So these are the 4 right efforts. So then the question is, what is these unwholesome or wholesome states? What are they? So when we talk about this, we're always talking about 2 things. We're talking about the 5 hindrances and the 7 bojjhangas. So the 5 hindrances are, of course, the unwholesome, unskillful, and the 7 bojjhangas are, of course, the wholesome and skillful. So it's good to remember that when we talk about samavayama, right effort, it's part of the samadhi division of the meditation division of the Noble Eightfold Path. So this is specifically referring to meditation practice. However, it's possible to look at the Buddha's teachings and to see how we can use this not only in our meditation practice but also in our daily life. We want to stop doing bad things in the world, unwholesome actions, unwholesome speech. We want to cultivate wholesome actions, wholesome speech. But when we talk about samavayama in this way, we're particularly talking about in our meditation practice. But like I say, it is possible to broaden that scope. So who here knows about the 5 hindrances? Pancha nivaranas. Can I see a show of hands of people who know? Yeah? So about a third of you. And I reckon there's probably some more of you who are too shy to raise your hands, worried that I was going to pick on you and ask you what they were. For those people who know, you're so fortunate, you're so lucky. You really are. Because you at least have these tools that you can start to work with in your mind. And for those people who don't know, it's so hard without this knowledge. Your poor mind has just been doing all this stuff, and you don't have any of the signposts to help you say, oh, this is unwholesome, this is not useful, this is unskillful, will lead to bad results. Before the Buddha was enlightened, when he was a bodhisattva and he was struggling with his own practice, one day he said to himself, there are these 2 types of thought. There's these unwholesome thoughts and there's these wholesome thoughts. So it started to develop some awareness in his practice that the kind of unwholesome thoughts he was having were thoughts of sense desire, sensory pleasures. You know, things like wanting more chocolate cake, wanting another cup of tea, wanting to go listen to music, those sorts of things. And the second was thoughts of ill will, thoughts of harm. These 3 different thoughts. Ill will we all understand, hate, yeah? Thoughts of cruelty and harm. This is like wanting people to fail at work, I wish they'd get in trouble for that, I hope they get punished for this or that. These kind of thoughts that are cruel. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But he saw that these thoughts didn't lead to good results. He said, these thoughts are harmful for me, harmful for others, harmful for both me and others. These thoughts obstruct wisdom. They don't lead to peace. They don't lead to Nibbana. And so he realized, these kinds of thoughts are not helpful to me. Perhaps you, when you sit in meditation, I don't know what goes on, but sometimes the mind will stray into these kinds of thoughts, right? You spend your entire meditation practice just dreaming of a holiday by the beach, building the perfect monastery, thinking about lunch, or you spend the whole time hating that annoying person in your life and just wanting them to get punished somehow, thinking of ways to get back at them for what they did. This is normal. This is the pattern of our mind. And it's okay, right? It's okay. In fact, if you become aware of this, then you're doing really well. we need to know what is going on, otherwise we can't abandon it, right? And so the first thing we need to develop is that mindfulness to see these things happening. Otherwise, we're just like everyone else with an untrained mind, just allowing these thoughts to go on, not even recognizing the harm that they can cause. So the Buddha said that this kind of mind is like a cow. So he gave us the image of a shepherd, not a shepherd, a cowherd, someone who looks after cows. And the image is a time when the field is full of grain. And this cowherd has to be really careful, right? You know, the cows want to eat the farm, the field, all that yummy grain, but it doesn't belong to those cows. They're not allowed to eat it. If they do, then that cowherd will get into trouble and he'll get punished. So he has to be very careful. He has to control the cattle, right? Lest they stray and start munching on the field. And this is what we do. We're like those cows. We see something over there, we think, okay, I'm just going to go and chomp on that. And we just spend all our day munching. And I remember, you can't tell, like I said before, you looked really peaceful, but who knows what was going on. I remember speaking to a friend once, and I said, we did a meditation retreat together, and I said, you looked so in the zone, you looked so amazingly still and peaceful. She's like, I was having fantasies the whole time, you know. And so that's what happens. We go and we munch on the grass, you know. But it's danger, you know. We'll get into trouble. And so the Buddha said, okay, well, there's the unwholesome thoughts. What about the wholesome thoughts, the opposites of those kinds of thoughts? So instead of sense desire, we have renunciation, voluntarily giving something up. Like what you've done when you've come here. You've given up. How many sensual pleasures have you given up? I've seen the food you have out there. You could be out there having a long, leisurely breakfast. You could be walking down by the water, going shopping. You could be enjoying so many things, right? But instead you've come here voluntarily to practice some meditation. So you've given something up. You've given up some sensory pleasures. And this is wholesome. Why is this wholesome? Because those sensory pleasures distract you from seeing the reality of your situation. We talked last night about the countless lives you've lived going through samsara. How many wonderful breakfasts you've had. But did any of them help you get out of samsara? No. So every time we have a thought of sensual pleasure, it's something that's pulling us away from our meditation practice, right? These sensory indulgences are what prevent us from sitting down on the cushion to look at our mind, right? We actually, someone said to me once, it's easy for you to meditate. You've got so much more time than me. It's like, no, I don't. I have exactly the same amount of time. We've all got 24 hours a day, okay? But I prioritize different things. And so if people are going out, to movies and dinner and things like that, fine. Enjoy these things for what they are, but don't expect them to take you to Nibbana. So these things take us away from our practice and cloud our vision. We think that they're going to make us happy, these things, but they never do. But anyway, I don't have time for a long talk about sensual desire. So that's the first wholesome thought, is renunciation. The second is the opposite of ill will, which is non-ill will, which is love, metta, there's a big difference between sitting there hating someone and sitting there giving love. I'll talk more about the defilement of hate in a little bit. But we know that there's a completely different feeling in our mind when we have love in our heart, and how expansive the mind can become, dwelling in love. It's limitless and vast, and it breaks down the barriers between us and others. When we have hate, it's always us and them. When we have love, it's just us. There's no me, mine. Those boundaries start to dissolve. So that's the second wholesome thought. The third wholesome thought is non-cruelty. So the opposite of cruelty. Non-harm. We don't want to hurt others. This is compassion. Karuna. We want beings to be safe and well, to be free from suffering. And again, this is such a different state of mind. Right? The thought of wanting someone to get punished or to be suffering, you know what that looks like. It's ugly, right? And the thought of compassion, it's so beautiful, so exalted. Again, we're not thinking about ourselves, we're thinking about other beings. We're starting to dissolve those boundaries between us and them. So these are the three wholesome thoughts: renunciation, non-ill will, non-cruelty. And the Buddha said, when we have these thoughts, they lead to good for us. They lead to good for others. They lead to good results for both ourselves and others, which is wonderful, right? This is how we judge a good thought or a good action. It's good for me, good for others, good for both of us. And it doesn't obstruct wisdom. It allows wisdom to grow. And it leads towards peace. It leads towards stillness. It leads towards Nibbana. And so the Buddha gave another analogy, saying that that same cow herd, those same cows, but the picture is slightly different now. The season has changed. Those tall grains have been harvested. So there's no grain left in the field for the cows to munch on. So that cow herd can just sit back and relax under a tree in the shade, eyes closed. The cows can wander wherever. He's not going to get in trouble. So that cow herd is like our mind. When we have unwholesome thoughts, we need to be careful. We need to be tapping those cows, keeping them out of trouble. When we have wholesome thoughts, we can just let the mind enjoy them. But he said eventually the mind and the body will become tired, even with those beautiful thoughts that are wholesome. And so we should take a subject for meditation and develop samadhi. So this shows that the Bodhisattva and the Buddha, who when he told this, he understood that our minds wander, right? And we understand that our mind wanders too. The problem for most of us in our meditation practice is we don't notice it and we don't know what to do about it. And so most people, this is where they really struggle with their practice. They're not sure what to do with their crazy mind. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. One of the reasons is that unfortunately a lot of meditation teachers tell us to do nothing, to just observe. And this is really good advice at certain times of our practice. But it's not always good advice. The idea is that if you just keep on watching, not getting involved, then the mind will change eventually and that defilement will stop. However, we've all got limited time and if our entire meditation practice is just taken up with thinking about terrible things, then we've wasted that time. And another problem with that is it's just not how the Buddha taught. The Buddha taught us to develop mindfulness, but mindfulness is not the goal. Mindfulness is not the reason for meditating. Mindfulness is just a tool to help us see what's going on. Mindfulness is a tool to help us see what's going on. But we need to respond to what's going on with wisdom. A good example of the mindful guard who's guarding a room full of treasure. So he's been told, just be mindful. Don't do anything. Just be mindful. And so he's standing there and he's noting. Standing still. Oh, someone coming. Walking past me, going into the treasure room, coming out with treasure. So this is the job of mindfulness, is just to see what's going on. But it's not very wise, is it, on its own? And I can't imagine any other activity in our life where we can just do nothing and expect good results, right? You can't just drive your car without ever having to make a left turn or slow down. And so when the Buddha talked about these things, he didn't say just do nothing. He gave so beautiful analogies, like a goldsmith who is trying to make some gold ornaments. He has to cook the gold. Melt, thank you. Must have lunch on my mind. He has to melt the gold, and then you have to cool the gold, right? You have to work with the gold in various ways. I'm showing my lack of knowledge about making gold here. And so the Buddha said, there comes a time when more heat is required to help melt the gold. So you need someone to fan the bellows, to put more air into the oven to create more heat, right? So sometimes you need to do that. And other times you need to sprinkle the water on the gold to cool it down. And other times you just need to stand back and do nothing. So if you only fan those bellows, the gold will get too hot and it will burn. If you only sprinkle water, then the gold will become brittle and crack. And if you do nothing, the gold will never get processed. So you need to do the right thing at the right time. Sometimes you need to bring more energy into your practice. Sometimes you need to calm down. That energy is the energy that comes with deliberately creating energy in the mind, doing something that wakes you up a little bit, right? This is the bellows, fanning the bellows. The sprinkling of water, maybe the mind is too agitated. We've got too much pity, too much activity in the mind. We need to calm it down. And then other times we shouldn't do anything at all. Just watch what's going on. And so when it comes to things like the defilements in our mind, what should we do with them? Should we just leave them there to do their own thing? Isn't that what we've been doing all along? Isn't that what's been keeping us here in samsara? So if we're not careful, if we're not aware, then the mind will just revert to its habitual tendencies. And those thoughts, they stain the mind. If we keep on allowing our mind to go to angry, hateful, hurtful thoughts, that's what you become. You've seen those grumpy old people, right? They didn't start that way. That's how they ended up. Because each of those thoughts that they had added up. You've seen people who are miserly, selfish. They didn't start that way. That's how they ended up. Because they didn't practice generosity and kindness. They were selfish, greedy. And then you've seen people who are happy, who have a lot of love. Their thoughts stained their mind. They practice kindness, generosity, they practice love. And so this all adds up to who they are. So what kind of mind do you want? What kind of person do you want to be? Was the sum total of our thoughts and actions and speech. So this is something that we should be aware of. That's why I said it's so lucky if you've heard about these 5 hindrances that I'm about to explore with you, because you know what to look out for. Someone has said, hey, there's these 5 things. When you see them in your mind, these are bad. And this shows that you've actually had some training. So when we talk about, the gradual training in the Buddhist path, this is something that you've learned. And for those people who aren't aware of these things, then their mind has not been developed in the same way yet. And so they may struggle with these things. Then the problem, of course, is even when you know about them, what to do with them. So I'm going to go through the 5 hindrances, pancha nivaranas, outlined by the Buddha. And I'm going to talk about them in a little. And then I'm going to talk about what to do with them, how to deal with them. And if we get time, I'll talk about the 7 bojjhangas as well. But what most important is to understand the bad stuff, prevent it from happening, and then the good stuff kind of almost takes care of itself in our mind. So the 5 hindrances. Does anyone know what they are? So who wants to start off? Okay. Okay, sloth and torpor is one of them. Right, very good. Sensual pleasures, sensual desire, yep. Restlessness. Doubt. We're missing one? Ill will, yep. And so I'll go through them in order, the way that the Buddha presented them. But I want you to imagine firstly a bowl of clear, pure water. Still, clear, you can see all the way down, a nice glass bowl of pure, clear water. So this is what we want our mind to be like, right? Clear, still, calm, peaceful. And the Buddha used this as an analogy for our mind. And he goes on to illustrate with each hindrance what it looks like in that bowl of water when that hindrance is present in our mind. So the first one is sense desire, sensory pleasures. So this actually, if you think about it, is basically the way we live our life, looking for sensual pleasures. My friends who've been taking me around, they've been talking about the wonderful food that you have here. And saying, oh, we have to get him this, we have to get him that. I'm like, I'm just a simple monk. I just eat whatever I'm given. And I said, I know you, Mara. But this is how we live. And of course, it's okay to enjoy your food. I'm not saying you shouldn't. But what we need to develop is some wisdom into the kind of happiness these things can bring us. And the Buddha gave many, many talks over and over and over and over again about sensory pleasures and how they're so impermanent, they're so fleeting, they're so beyond our control. These things can be taken away at any moment. Remember the coronavirus took away all of our pleasures, right? Yeah. And he gave wonderful analogies like a dog sitting outside the butcher shop getting thrown a bone that's been well scraped clean of meat, and that dog chewing on that bone, trying to get some meat out of it, but all it gets is the flavour of meat that's been left on the bone. It can never truly be satisfied. And it's like us, we reach out and grab onto these things thinking, oh, this will bring me pleasure, but it's always so unfulfilling. We want something more, something new, something different. We're never satisfied with sensual pleasures. And sometimes they're so disappointing. You get so excited about a particular food, and you sit down, you've got this anticipation, then you have a taste and you're like, oh, actually this isn't really, but you had so much anticipation for this pleasure. So this is what it's like for so many things. And all of our pleasure seeking is competitive. I don't know if you have it here, but like when it's sale time in Australia, you see people like going feral, like going crazy, pushing people out of the way in the shops. There's stampedes and fighting over, t-shirts or whatever, and it's crazy. But this is just a small version of what's actually going on in the world. We're competing for the pleasure of being close to the ocean in a nice apartment, or getting enough money so that we can buy the things that we want in work. And even on a bigger picture, this is why countries go to war over access to things, stuff. And all of these things can be taken away. Thieves will steal our mobile phone, or will drop it. These things are so impermanent and so unstable and so insignificant, and yet this is how we go through our life. And then comes the meditation. You just sit down and you're just thinking about these things over and over again, and this is how we get the illusion of it will satisfy us in our head. We've kind of formed it right there. Oh, if only I had this thing, then I'd be happy. But it doesn't work like that. So this is sensual pleasures, and there's an enjoyment to them. It's true, but there's many drawbacks to sensual pleasures as well. That's why the Buddha talked about it so frequently. Sometimes when I talk about sensual pleasures, though, I start to see people kind of like recoiling a little bit. They don't want to hear, because it hurts, right? To think, oh, this stuff isn't going to bring me happiness. It hurts to realize, that's my entire life, looking for sensual pleasures. That's how I live my entire life. Maybe this Dharma isn't for me. But if you start to inquire, you'll start to see the limitations. And certainly it's something that I've started to see as a bhikkhu. I can appreciate now what the Buddha was talking about, how you can be happy with very little, actually. You don't need all of this stuff. And all of that stuff becomes such a burden anyway. But I'll leave it there. And so the image of that bowl of water is colourful dyes thrown into that water, red, yellow, blue, green, swirling about. Yeah, colour and movement, that's how they get us at the shopping centres. That's how they entice us in the advertisements, colour and movement. That's what that bowl looks like. That's what our mind looks like. Kind of like little fireworks, little streamers, celebrations. This is what it's like when we've got a mind of sensual pleasures. There's all this activity swirling about in our mind. Agitated. Moving around from one thing to the next. Never satisfied, never still, never clear, like that bowl of water could be. So this is the first hindrance, sensual pleasures. So that's number one. Number two, ill will. Ill will is such a wonderful mind, isn't it? Don't you feel powerful when you hate someone? And just kind of, you've got so much energy that comes into your mind, right? It keeps you awake at night, doesn't it? You can't sleep. You know, that was what the Buddha said. He said he gave a talk about 7 things that would please my enemy. And the first one is, you look ugly. When you become full of hate, you look ugly. And your enemy is like, whoa. So that's like, if that's not reason enough. So you look ugly. And then the second one, he said, is you lose sleep. So you know what happens if you don't get your beauty sleep. You look even uglier. So the Buddha was obviously appealing to our vanity. But yeah, this mind of ill will, and I especially love talking to Buddhists about ill will because we have this conundrum. We're supposed to be peaceful and kind and full of love, and so we can't admit that we've got hate in our hearts, right? It's really hard. We can't admit to others, oh yeah, I spent my entire metta session hating on my mother-in-law. We can't tell people that, so we hide it. The danger, of course, is that we hide it from ourselves. We pretend it's not there. Oh, I couldn't have hate in my heart. I'm a spiritual person. I'm a Buddhist. I practice metta. And we can't see it. This is a really big danger, because if we don't see it, we can't deal with it. If we don't see it, we can't see the drawbacks that it has. So the image that the Buddha used was this bowl of water bubbling, boiling. This is what it feels like when you're angry, when you've got ill will, right? You feel the energy coming up, you feel the rage. And, you know, there's so much power in your mind, it feels so good. And too much energy, perhaps. It really does disturb the mind, though, doesn't it? You can't think about anything else when you've got ill will in the mind. It's just bubbling away, and you repeat it and repeat it. I can't believe they did that. I hate them. I'm going to get them back. I don't like them. And it just goes round and round, bubbling, bubbling, bubbling. And so there's no peace in a mind like that. There's no clarity. The water is so agitated and disturbed. And so this kind of mind is not that clear, pure water that we need to get insight and wisdom. So that's the second. The third is sloth and torpor, or dullness and drowsiness. So this is when we feel really sleepy and we start nodding off. So is this a problem for you? Yeah? Sometimes you just need a little rest. Sometimes you just need a little lie down. We're so busy in life. So there's a bit of a difference between the hindrance and then just like, you know, regular physical tiredness, or perhaps, you know, after a meal, you know, it's natural that the body starts to feel a bit tired. And so we can distinguish this natural kind of hindrance from this natural phenomena from the hindrance if that hindrance is really persistent, and if after you have a little nap it's still there, then you know this hindrance is present. And it feels a bit like walking through concrete, wet concrete, walking through mud or something. It's like really difficult when the mind is like that. It's just so sluggish. You have no power at all. And it's the opposite of that bubbling energy of hate, which keeps you alive. With this hindrance of sloth and torpor, it's like a feeling of sinking down. And you see people sinking down. I remember Ajahn Brahm tells a story about a monk in Thailand. I don't know if it's a true story. A monk in Thailand who kept on falling asleep, like this. And so they eventually sent him to like a monk reform school where they deal with this particular problem. So what they do is they put a box of matches on your head. So if you were to fall, the matches fall off your head. And so, he went there, he did his time, and he came back to the monastery, and he was like this. So it's a real problem for us in meditation sometimes, and it feels like there's nothing you can do. The image that the Buddha used was the image of a mossy algae water plants covering the surface of that water, so you can't see anything. You've got no clarity. It's actually, when you're falling asleep, it's very close to delusion, isn't it? The mind starts to kind of unwind into fantasies and dreams. And so it's very close to delusion. It's very far from clarity. And so, when it's present, it feels like it's impossible to work with. That's why the Buddha actually gave some really good strategies for dealing with that kind of mind, like pulling your earlobes, standing up, doing some walking meditation, reciting all the Dharma that you know. And so these are strategies that are useful because you're not just sitting there dealing with it, you're actively trying to combat it. So the Buddha obviously knew that it was a big problem and gave particular strategies for dealing with it, none of which are just sitting there and enduring it. All of them are combating it in some way. Anyway, so that's the third hindrance, sloth and torpor, or dullness and drowsiness. The fourth is restlessness and remorse. Restlessness and remorse. So the restlessness is that constant agitation, that constant movement of the mind, always looking for something else to do, wanting to be somewhere else, wanting to move this way, to move that way, wanting to get up, wanting to think about this, do that. This constant agitation of the mind. And it's often in regard to future, wanting to do something in the future, moving towards something in the future. And then remorse is more about the past, thinking about the past. Have you experienced this? Oh, I wish I hadn't done that thing. Oh, that was a really silly mistake I made. I wish things hadn't turned out like that. Oh, that was such a nice time of my life. Going back to the past. But still the same sort of direction that is away from peace, away from stillness, away from clarity, away from here, away from now. So it takes us away from our meditation. And so the image that the Buddha used to illustrate this is the image of that bowl of water with waves, choppy waves, moved by the wind of restlessness. It's always pushing, pushes the water, makes the water choppy. And of course we can't see clearly, we can't get any calm and peace with a mind that has waves. So this is something that's a problem. And actually, for a lot of people, this hindrance will be present for a lot of their meditation time. And so obviously they're not getting any of that clarity that the Buddha recommended we get. They're just allowing the mind to wander restlessly. And the last hindrance is the hindrance of doubt. Vicikicca, yes, very good. And why is doubt a hindrance? Wrong view? Yeah, it will be, if you knew it was wrong view, you'd have right view, and you wouldn't have doubt. But it's not knowing whether this is wrong or right. That's doubt. And it's a killer, because it's like, am I doing this right? I don't know. Is this the right way to meditate? Am I capable of, I don't know if this is working. I don't think this is going the way it should. Then you're like opening your eyes to see if and so this doubt is incapacitating. It's like when you have to make a decision, you know, when you've like got something to decide and you just can't make a choice. It's like you're incapacitated. And sometimes it doesn't matter what decision you make, it's just like the real problem is that indecision. And with doubt, not knowing is a problem. You're so unsure of what leads to wholesome results and what leads to unwholesome results. You're unsure of the practice, unsure of the path. Maybe you're unsure of the teacher. Is the teacher competent? Do they know what they're talking about? Is their meditation method correct? And so when we have these doubts, we undermine our own practice and we kind of chip away at our meditation because we spend our entire time wandering, questioning, doubting, not being sure, not knowing. And this, of course, is the opposite of what we should be. We should be certain. We should be understanding. We should be clear. We should have knowledge. And so the way to overcome doubt, of course, is to ask questions, to learn more, to know more, so that we can overcome doubt. So we need to inquire more on the spiritual path. So the image that the Buddha used to describe the hindrance of doubt is a bowl full of muddy water. Yeah? You can't see. It's impossible to know what is in there. And so there's no clarity. So these 5 hindrances and these 5 images, let's go through them again. Sense desire, which is the image of a bowl of water with colourful dye thrown into it. Ill will, which is a bowl of water which is bubbling like anger, yeah? And the third one, sloth and torpor, and the image, bowl of water with moss or pond slime. The fourth is restlessness and remorse, and that image is the water that is full of waves, choppy. And then the last one is doubt and muddy water. So what to do when these hindrances are present then? So firstly, we need to be aware that they're there. So we need mindfulness. This is why the Buddha said develop mindfulness. Then when a hindrance comes into the mind, you're like, I see it. Often, when a hindrance is present, we become aware of it quite late. We're like indulging in it for a good 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, and then we're like, oh, I was meant to be watching my breath. And we go back to our breath. So that's fine, that's good, actually. It's good to realise. You understand, this is a hindrance. There are many drawbacks to this hindrance. This is not clear, calm, peaceful. This is not going to help me in my meditation practice. This will not lead me to Nibbana. And hopefully, if you've got a little bit of wisdom, you'll learn this hindrance is not good, and you'll let it go. Sometimes the hindrance can be very sneaky and it will come back. You let it go again. It comes back, you let it go. You don't get involved. You don't want to get involved. So this is why this appropriate attention, yoniso manasikara, this wise attention is really important. So we have mindfulness, which is just seeing what's going on, and then we need a kind of attention that has a wisdom aspect to it, which is called yoniso manasikara. It's understanding where things are coming from and where they're going to take you. Oh, this is an unwholesome hindrance, going to lead to unwholesome results. So then wisdom kicks in and it's like, do you want to go there? No. And you let go. And so this process is very simple. It doesn't require any force. It's not willpower, it's wisdom power. You see the problem and you just let it go. And when you let it go, over time the mind learns quicker and quicker. There's this hindrance. This isn't good. Let it go. And you actually develop a kind of muscle in your practice that learns to be exercised in this way. And the hindrances start to fade and not be as strong. They don't have as much control. Why? Firstly, you're more aware of them. You understand their drawbacks and you understand the escape. You understand how to get away from them, how to let go. And so what we start to become aware of in our meditation practice is not just when a hindrance is present, but when a hindrance is absent too. So we know when it's present, but we also know when it's absent. And this is really important. So we don't just spend all of our time watching for the hindrance to come along. We experience the freedom that comes with its absence. And this is beautiful. A mind without hindrances is very close to very deep stages of meditation. The hindrances are what prevent us from getting deep meditation. That's why we should be aware when they're present. That's why we should know when they're absent. So a mind that is free of sense desire, the Buddha said it's like a person who has a debt, a mortgage, and then has paid off that debt, paid off that mortgage. Suddenly, they're free. That thing that was hanging over their head is gone. And they experience a kind of freedom. The Buddha said that a mind that is freed from ill will is like a person who has been sick. You know how it is when you're sick? You can't enjoy anything. Nothing tastes good. All your favourite things don't help. Everything sucks. And nothing is enjoyable. But then when you get better, you start to enjoy life again, right? This is how it is to have a mind free from ill will. You feel good. The mind is open. Beautiful mind, free of ill will. When you have sloth and torpor, thank you, in your mind, it's like you're a prisoner in a cell, a small, poky little prison cell. And freedom from that mind of dullness and drowsiness is like being let out of prison and experiencing freedom. A mind that has restlessness and remorse, this is like someone who is a slave, always being told what to do. Go here, go there, bring this, do that. But freedom from restlessness is like that slave getting freedom. We're the slave, by the way. Restlessness is our owner, always telling us what to do, and we do it. So it's good to be free from that feeling. And the last one, doubt. Doubt is like a person who is trying to cross a desert and they don't know the way, which way to go. They're hot and thirsty. And freedom from that is someone saying, oh yes, look, there's an oasis over there, this is the way you need to go. And they know the path. So they can get out of that desert towards water and safety and security. And so this is how it is for us too, that we are travellers in the desert, full of doubt, full of defilements, and these are the things that we experience in our meditation. If we can understand that these 5 hindrances take us away from peace in the here and now, we can understand how working with them, abandoning them, will lead to deep states of meditation. If the mind doesn't have these things in them, then the mind is pure and clear and bright, powerful, full of energy. We spend so much of our mental energy harnessed to these hindrances. Imagine if they were absent, how powerful your mind would be. How clear, bright, strong your mind is without these hindrances. And then that's when you get the penetration of mind that can see in accordance with reality. That's when you get the wisdom of how things really are. And this is the kind of practice that will help us get out of suffering and attain Nibbana. So it's so important to allow these hindrances to disappear from our practice in meditation. And it's possible, even just for a few moments, you might have a mind free of these hindrances. And that is very beautiful in your practice. If you even just a few moments, it'll transform your life. And so these hindrances, 5 hindrances, are what we need to work with in our mind. And these 5 hindrances, when we work with them, we oppose them with the 7 bojjhangas, and we don't have time to talk about them. So we'll have to have a chat about the 7 bojjhangas another time. But just to reframe it in terms of the 4 right efforts, the unwholesome states are the 5 hindrances, and the wholesome states, the things that we need to develop, these are the 7 bojjhangas. And so these are mindfulness, investigation, energy, rapture, samadhi. Have I missed one? Energy? Did I miss energy? Okay, so we'll put that before piti, and then the last one is upekkha. Thank you. It's hard to remember all these things, right? And so we can perhaps talk about that another time. I think you're going to have a little break now, and then you're coming back for a reflection. Is that right? Am I around for that, or am I free and easy? Free. Okay, very good. So please have a good Dharma discussion, and thank you for your attention, and I hope that this talk was beneficial to you on your path. We'll pay respects to the Triple Gem.